From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, my name is Stephen Winnick, and I'm here at the Library of Congress with the band Beausoleil, or the Beausoleil Quartet, as they're called today. And I'm interviewing them for the American Folklife Center here at the Library of Congress. So I'm going to sort of address some general questions to all of you. In particular, question about what the Cajun music scene was like when you were growing up. So to sort of set the scene for how Cajun music has changed over the last 30 years, 40 years.
Keep on going.
50 years.
Well, I don't think it was ever a scene. You know, the music was created for the community, just for people in Southwest Louisiana. It was a way of communicating news, and I mean, it's very, Louisiana, it's a beautiful state, but it's very hard, and you work hard, but you play hard too. So the music was very much a part of that. My father had 5 sisters, and you know, 2 of them sang ballads, and then we would have these parties, you know, family get-togethers, whether it was a meal or whatever, where everybody would show up and everybody would play something. It didn't matter what, whether it was a violin or a trumpet or piano, whatever. And I think everybody just really liked it, that the fact that it was still sung in French. The old people liked it because it was called old people's music. We never called this Cajun music growing up. And it was French music, or the musique française. And it was just something, you know, me personally, I kind of just took for granted. It was like, you know, somebody said, when did you learn your first Cajun song? Or when did you learn your first Christmas song? It was kind of the same thing. But everybody did it, and I'm talking about the 50s now, 1950s. And there's 22 civil parishes that in Southwest Louisiana, it's like a triangle, that speak French. And all those different parishes had different songs and different people. A lot had been forgotten because the original recordings with the RCA Victor coming in and wanted to sell Victrola, so they were recorded for commercial use. That was from like 28 to 36. And then World War II happened, and a lot of people, you know, realized what they had when they went away, because it was different, like no other place, obviously speaking French. And so I think there was a resurgence. There's always was resurgence that happened then in the 50s, and the 60s, and then, of course, it was television. And when we had our first local station in Lafayette, it was KLFY TV, and every Sunday morning they had Passepartout, which was a show that Aldous Rocher played on, and it was like this big band. I mean, we used to hear like accordion or fiddle player or somebody. There was like twin fiddles, steel guitar, electric guitar, drums, you know, bass, and the whole bit. So that was like another resurgence, kind of thing. And but I think music has always been in our culture. So that wasn't, you know, that was something just there. What happened sort of in the 30s, people were punished for speaking French on the school ground. So either they left school, you know, that joke, right? You know, when they went to math class, they say one, they say two, they said bye. You know, okay. So, but it like happened more than, it's not really a joke, it happened. Right. But a lot of people preserved it, and in Southwest Louisiana growing up, a lot of people didn't speak English in that period because they didn't have to. And so that was that. Now, what happened to us, for me, is that when someone died that was, you know, proponent of this music, you know, not only did you grieve for their death, physically death, but whatever history they had, because our history was basically oral with the music too, but our history of our culture too. So for us, I mean, it's like it was, we didn't want to see that, so then we decided, well, we have to do something about it. How do you do something about it? You learn the music. And just like that, I mean, it's not for no reward or no end result. The thing was just it needed to be done. And
so you got a sense that the older generation was passing away, and you decided it was time to apprentice.
Because nobody was looking at it as it should be, as we thought it should be, because it's not just two-step and waltzes. I mean, there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of cultural information. And we thought we were isolated. We thought nobody in the world knew about this stuff. And that started to change a lot in the 60s too, when some groups went to Newport, et cetera. It happened to us when we were invited to go to France. But anyway, I don't want to be long-winded about this. But it was something that I just want to say that the people who held the music, you did it because they had to. I mean, it was just a passion. It was a remarkable passion, not because of any kind of reward, except the fact that they knew these songs. And people like fiddle players and like Edius Nakan, I mean, he would sing songs about kings and queens, and we know he never knew any kings or queens or even knew what that was. But the fact that the music keeps on going, regenerating.
So you mentioned that early period when, you know, in the 20s and 30s when there were commercial recordings made of Cajun music. Were those still influential on people when you were growing up? I mean, were they still listening to those records? Or?
Well, you don't have those machines, 78s. What happened, a lot of, this is one example, was like, I mentioned Amadé Ardouin, who was the first Creole, really, accordion player, and prolific. And we play about 80% of his songs. I mean, Cajun repertoire now, or Creole repertoire. There was a blind, almost blind Cajun guy, white guy, who learned all his songs. And most people thought this guy, Ira Lejeune, his name, came up with all these songs. And nobody could reference back to the 78s. The first time I really listened to 78 was on a 33 1/3 LP from Chris Strakowitz, or Hulu Records, where he did this 5 series of old, and we just went crazy. This is, because we thought, oh, this is a long time ago, I mean, it's ancient history. And then when I first met Dennis, first time I met Dennis McGee, I said, I thought you were dead. He said, not yet, you know? So that's a big jump, too.
And I mean, you also mentioned that sort of moment in the 60s when groups started going to places like Newport.
But they were not, I mean, at home they didn't believe it.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like they were going to make a living about this, you know? It was regular people, you know, people, nobody really made a living at this. I mean, you played Saturday nights, whatever, or, I mean, we had a lot of people who came from there, like Vin Bruce and Jimmy C. Newman, who went to Nashville, Doug and Rusty Kershaw, et cetera. But you had to get out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Of Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, tell me about some of the guys that you sought out and worked with. You know, start with Dennis, since you already mentioned.
Well, yeah, with Dennis, like I said, I first met him and I thought he was dead, you know, and it was a joke, and he says, no. And so I went to study with him. I acquired a grant from the National Endowment, and with his brother-in-law, Sadie Corville, because to me that was the oldest form of Cajun music, or what we call French music, and it was so the twin fiddle styles, and which was not popular and not played by anybody else. This was, they recorded in the late 20s and 30s, so this style was not there. A lot of modern musicians would always say, why are you wasting your time learning that music? I said, are you kidding? I mean, this is the essence. But it wasn't the popular country and westernized Cajun music that was dance hall at that time. I was very much interested in the blues in this music, and there's 2 bluesy Creole musicians. One was Canry Fontenot, and the other was Bebe Carrier. Because they had a certain style that you did. There was always blues in our music, and I was always interested in where did this come from, you know, and in Louisiana, because Louisiana blues is different. I mean, there are 12-bar, 16-bar, you know, from the Delta in Louisiana, but these Cajun blues, French blues are a little different. And I guess, and of course, the Balfour brothers, both Will and Dewey, you know, they were very influential, because that totally, we loved their music because it was acoustic. When it was away from Louisiana, it was in Louisiana, it was a lecture, but nevertheless. And another man that I found, his name was Varis Conard. And I said, Conard, what is that? That's Britain? He says, oh no, my grandfather was an O'Connor. Oh, so O'Connor. And he played a certain style, very lilting fiddle style that he had never played with an accordion. So it was kind of, you know, because when you play a fiddle and accordion, people like Hector Douillon, he was another guy. And he played a certain seconding style that was pretty amazing. But it was the accordion that was the main instrument, because it was loud and et cetera, a lot of things like that. So those are the people, basically.
So, so Mitch, why don't you mention Dewey, because I know you worked with Dewey as well. So what was that like? How did you meet him, and how did you start to play with him?
Oh, I met him. I used to go to Mark Savoy's jam when I was learning, when I was a kid. And I'd play string bass over there. And one time, Mark Savoy was like, hey, Mitchell, come over here. Dewey's on the phone. I was like, what? Dewey Balfour? Yeah, he needs a bass player. his bass player got in a wreck that night before, and I had a gig at the Liberty just all of a sudden. So Mark hands me the phone. He was like, "All right, do you know Cajun music?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know the chords?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, don't mess up tonight. I'm gonna trust you." So I got to the Liberty, and my family's all from Mamou, and Dewey's, the Balfours are all from Mamou, and so. Right when he found out who my family was, then I became part of the family, you know, and it was awesome. And then we came here in '98 and played for 2 weeks, and it was like Jamie Barazah. There was a guy, Dudley Abear, maybe, I think, that played guitar. But we played with the Lawtell Playboys, and Dewey was awesome. I never took fiddle lessons because my hero was Dennis McGee, and I never could really pick up the way Dewey wanted me to play. He was a really strict teacher. Like when he would teach you, you had to learn the chords first. And it was that Balfour style, and I was learning more of the melodies from Dennis, and so he'd get fed up and say, "Okay, go practice." So I was mainly his bass player.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, talk about the difference between Cajun fiddle and other regional fiddle styles. I mean, it's quite different, and I think people can hear it, but maybe not understand what they're hearing.
Yeah, there's a lot of different styles. Like Mike said, Creole, like you had Canray and Boisset, and they played Creole, and the Cartier family. They played the same tunes that the white players were playing, but it just had that kind of different groove to it, and I always liked Creole. That was kind of my thing. And to me, Dennis McGee, even though he was a white Irish guy, you know, he played more of that Creole style because he played with Amadei, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, just for the purposes of people who might be watching this, of course, we use that word Creole, and it means so many different things. So in this context, explain what we're talking about when we say Creole.
Well, Creole is like rural French-speaking people of color. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it. And because there were a lot of free people of color, even though they were black in Southwest Louisiana, and they were side by side with whoever was there, mostly French, not only Cajun, but they were French too. So, but they learned, there was American songs. I mean, there was a lot of, in the Library of Congress, when Alan Lomax went down, he recorded Wayne Perry, and he plays like Cluck Old Hen, what other songs, and Sitting on Top of the World. Right. But it doesn't sound like that at all, you know. So it's just, you know, whatever it comes from, whether it's Appalachian or whatever, the music is a reflection of the landscape. And in Louisiana, it's muggy, it's hot, it's muddy, and the pace is slower. So I think that adds to it.
Yeah, I think I hear more drones in the fiddle playing too than I do in most of the other styles. So.
Yeah, and it's like that's that early style. They said they played in Nova Scotia or Acadie, but also there was a Frenchman, I believe his name was C.C. Robin, Robin, who came through and mentioned that he heard these twin fiddles playing in Louisiana. It said it sounded like something you'd hear in France. This is pre-accordion.
Right. Well, the scene changed a lot in the 70s and 80s. I mean, Cajun music went through a sort of massive development, and people outside Cajun country came to even know that there was such a thing as Cajun music. How did that affect people who were playing it in Louisiana?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. There's a lot more people who got interested in it. See, I always remember Mike was talking about in 1968 they started. That's when I first took French in school. I was in 5th grade. And there was an organization called CODEFIL, the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana. So they had these signs everywhere. You know, speak French. It's your heritage. Everywhere. It was all in French. And apparently the culture was going. You know, I was too young to know. But when I was in high school, and Mike was starting up Beausoleil and Koto, I got interested. He called me up one day and said, "Come, let's go record a record." I'd never really played the music. I was learning guitar. You know, I was in the folk music, acoustic, always. But I know that we did that, and people looked at us like they thought we're all Canadians. I swear to God, that they still think we're Canadians.
I mean, you're young. You play this music.
And but it got, you know, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, we played and played and played, and I think that younger people got interested in playing music. They thought it was neat. I don't know if they speak it. We're losing the language.
Right.
But I think that was part of it. And also, what I've discovered now is that people that had heard us and the older people play that live elsewhere outside Louisiana, they're all retired now, and they want to learn how to play. So there's a lot of interest in these camps where you go and you learn, and they come to Louisiana, they retire there, and they dance, and some of them try to tell you that what you're doing isn't right and all that, but that's beside the point. They have a better way, but I think that's the popularity of it. I think the kids at home, that there's, you know, if you go to the festival like Hayan in Lafayette, and there's all these people that they play, and they're good. They don't sing very well, I don't think, but they play, you know, and it used to be just accordions, because apparently accordion is a little easier to play than violin. Now it's all violins and fewer accordion players. It's really interesting how it does that. So, you know, so I don't think they're not going to lose the music, but I don't hear any of them singing. They all can play.
That's interesting, yeah. So is the language going as well? I mean,
well, as I say, in the 1970 census, they said there were 1 million French-speaking people in Southwest Louisiana. Maybe exaggeration.
Right.
In the year 2000, there were less than 100,000 French-speaking people, so that says it right there.
Yeah.
But it goes through like different windfalls. I mean, you got, like I said, on the first television station, there was French there. They had an announcer by the name of Jim Olivier who got up every morning at, 5:30?
5 o'clock in the morning.
And he had groups on, after French Rosary, he had groups on, it was all in French. And so it was there, but because that was the main population. And then, you know, Louisiana, because it was basically agriculture. And then when they found oil, then you have an influence of a lot of other people, which changed the music, et cetera. And the transition happened in the 60s, basically. I think that the early 60s, you started seeing that. For us, we were like, it was the young people born in the 50s who can remember it. And then we kind of got together, it was about 12 of us. There was one who was like, you know, Barry Ossolet, because he went on to become a professor and a folklorist. I mean, there was so many people, some French people who were there that helped us out. The Pontier used to write in French and in English, and this was young people, and when we were young, but that influenced that in a group like David mentioned, Coteau and Beausoleil. We were one of the first young people. You know, I can't even remember people my age. I mean, I think, what's his name from Kaplan? You know, Jesse Leger. He and I are about the same age, and that's about the only person my age. So it was funny. So you'd have to go through Mark, because he was an accordion player and maker, and Mark Savoie, and he's 11 years older than I am. But so he was really at that point where he saw more of the French than we did. And Mark and I obviously played together, still play together basically. And but it was people like that who had this vision. And so we always strive to do it right. I mean, it was for no reason. I mean, we weren't trying to be popular or anything like that. We're trying to get the song out. It was like our first record we recorded was in France. It was just happened. I mean, we're on a Bateau Mouche, and this guy came up to us and said, "I like your music. You have a record." I said, "No. Would you like to make a record?" And he said, "Yeah." And he was like the head of Pate Marconi EMI. So he said, "We don't have too many days, no problem." But the really first record in the United States we did for Floyd, and I tried to do the whole gamut of it. First of all, we had the French and English translations. And the second one, it wasn't just two steps and waltzes. There were ballads, there were Tin Pan Alley songs, there were Creole songs, there were reels and stuff like that. Because that's what we were learning after uncovering this, where they just go to the dance, let's get drunk, or try to get laid. You know, it was like a whole different picture. So we played what we called, I guess, back porch music or kitchen music. Right. You know,
so when you said Floyd, that's Floyd Swallow?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So. It was called The Spirit of Cajun Music, and the Cajuns of Spirit Music.
Nice. So, David, something that you said, you know, you weren't really playing the music, you were learning guitar, and that sort of brings up that question of how much guitar has changed in the way it's played in Cajun music over the last little while, and you being a big part of that. What did you do to integrate different guitar styles into Cajun music?
Well, I had a couple of heroes. You know, Doc Watson's my hero, you know, and stuff like that. At home, there weren't that many people that played. There was 3 guitar players, 3 or 4. One was Rodney. I love the way Rodney Balfour played. And then DL was there, DL Menard, and then Preston Manuel, who was always played with Dennis.
Yeah.
So you had to, and Preston was, by this time, you know, as a teenager, or just, you know, I just graduated from high school, you go to Fred's in the lounge in Mamou on, what, Saturday morning at, what, 8 a.m., something like that, and go to the radio show. And these guys just, they'd be drunk at 8 o'clock in the morning playing music. But I'd watch him. You'd see Nathan Abshire would be there, would be the accordion player. So you get to see these guys. So you see Preston interact. And I thought the stuff that he did was good. And the guy played the chords, what I heard. Yeah. So, you know, for me, it was like, when you blend all that together and the stuff that I was learning, I like folk music. That was my thing. I listened to Paul Simon, you know, and I said, when I discovered Doc and then a couple of blues guys, I said, this is like really cool stuff. And I thought you could put them together. I really don't know what people are doing now. I don't live in Lafayette. I don't really go see that many bands. I don't know what they do. And occasionally someone says, well, I heard, you know, I said, I'm trying to play it like you. I learned this from Mitchell because Mitchell teaches. So he tells me that people are interested in that. And I think it's really hard to do. It's hard to actually be heard and set up, play acoustic. Like what we do is very difficult, and it takes a lot of patience. And like we have our own sound guy usually. It's hard, and not everyone can afford to do that or want to do that. And an acoustic guitar is just not loud. It's not as loud as an accordion. It's definitely not loud as a fiddle. Yeah. You know, and to make it fit and try to do stuff, so you know.
That's our sound.
That's what we do. And when I play solo, I played all fingerstyle and open tuning. So that's from a Hawaiian influence, believe it or not, which is really bizarre. But you know,
makes sense though. Yeah.
But the whole deal was the rhythms. I thought the rhythms were cool. You know, getting into it, learning it. When he called up in 1977 in August, we're gonna make a record. Come practice. You know, I'd never really thought about it before. Never really listened to it. You see it on TV and kind of laugh at the old people dancing. That's what you know. These people are like, what, 30 years older than me. They were old, you know. They were like 45 years old.
That's old.
You know, and they were dancing. It's like, well, that's it. And, you know, and our folks would make fun of it because I think they made fun of the language. If you spoke French, you were stupid. You know, you weren't uneducated.
No,
So-
but they both spoke French.
But they did.
And my father
Well,
always
they didn't want us to know what they were talking about. What do you think they'd speak? French.
You see, that's how I learned how to speak French, because I said, they used to play cards. And you could only stay in the room where they play bourrée. And you only stay in the room if they tell you something to do and you knew what it was and you'd answer back in French. So I was adamant about learning that because I wanted to learn all the dirty words, you know. And so I did.
That's the truth. That's how it was. It was different. They want you to go learn French in school, but not French what they spoke at home.
Yeah, but they kept it up. I mean, it was Paulette and I both spoke French. It was,
Well, we all understood it.
Yeah.
because that's what was people our age.
Well, the old people in the country, if you see the old people, that's all they spoke. They just spoke French. The gardener that my grandmother had, he didn't speak a word of English. But you have to understand what he was saying, you know?
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. Or the guy that lived next door, could you come wind my watch? He'd say that in French because he had arthritis. He couldn't, or arthritis, like they call it. It's like, you know, it was weird. It was like, when you think of it like now, it's like, man, what a weird time it was. It was like in the late 60s, early 70s was a mess.
There was it was not about commercialization. When Paul Prudhomme, who had a small restaurant in Opelousas, moved to New Orleans, burned the redfish, it became a phenomenon. And then people started looking at it. And then Glenn Peet did a movie. I think movies had a lot to do with it. He did one called Belisaire the Cajun. And then there was another movie called The Big Easy, which was terrible. But nevertheless, it took place in New Orleans and brought out, you know, the Louisiana music. And that began this whole thing of Cajun restaurants in all parts of the country. I mean, we got some stuff, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't what we were used to. So we have it in our contract, do not service Cajun food.
Under absolutely no circumstance do you feed the band Cajun food.
And so we're in St. Louis, outside of St. Louis. It was the one that, anyway, this little town. And the guy says, somebody's cooking for you. Goes, oh, no. And we walk in, there's like a Magnolite, and it's got about 10 pounds of crawfish. Oh, this might be good. Well, you know, 10 pounds of crawfish would feed about 20 people if they weren't Cajuns. Well, we ate the whole thing, so that kind of thing. But then that gradually changed, and of course, you know, it became commercial, you know, blackened chicken and stuff like that, you know. But that all, with that, would excite about the music, because it would have to have the music with it. So that influenced a lot, too. And my wife always says, well, you know, you're the reason why it's like this, you know, because we go out and say, oh, y'all come. Well, they came, and they didn't leave. And what's odd about it is that you can't go to a Cajun or a Zydeco dance and have just people from Louisiana there. That's when we played. We said just people from Louisiana. Check their licenses, you know, because I mean it's changed that much. Right. It's become a thing, like David was beginning to have his tirade about. But it's we caused it in a way, and it's good because it helped people. But it's I can't even tell you how different it is now. I mean, just the fact. I mean, Mark Savoy says there's no more Cajun. They're just rednecks, you know? And so that's a whole different story. I'd let Mark answer that one. But I mean, that's his perspective, and you know.
But I mean, that also opens up kind of another question, which is, so you were saying, you know, check their licenses, only people from Louisiana, but not everyone from Louisiana is a Cajun, and not everyone who spoke French in Louisiana was a Cajun.
Exactly. Well, that's what I mean. The name, it doesn't exist. It's all a myth. You know?
Right.
So we don't exist, you know. Right. I don't know why we're talking. Why are we talking? Anyway, yeah, you're right. And that's because people, you know, they have Romeros, they have Hofpowers that only speak French. That was amazing, but that was the predominant language. And that was the strength we had, which is a strength in language, which is a strength in community, which evolves into music, okay? And when that stuff gets breaking out, or like David was saying, put down, I mean, we thought we were second-class citizens. When Nick Spitzer told me in 1973 that I could get a grant, I said, they give grants to Cajuns? That's how naive we were. Because it was like, you know, nobody, they just make fun of us. I mean, they made fun of us. We're from a little town called Scott, where we went to school in Lafayette, and people would make fun of us in Lafayette, you know, much less going out of the world. And then we realized, people in France love this stuff, and Canada, et cetera, so it has a different meaning.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned another band that you were in, Koto. Talk a little bit about that.
Koto. You want to see a picture?
Sure.
Okay. This was, they called it the Cajun Grateful Dead. What happened, it was Gary Newman, whose father was Jimmy C. Newman. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy C. Newman was from Ville Platte, and he played on the Hayride in Shreveport.
Hayride, yeah.
As did Elvis. He was there when Elvis ruined it. Nobody would come after Elvis was there. But he found his way to Nashville, and he did really, really well. I mean, you know, and he wrote this song called Cry, 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 and it became, you know, his song. And anyway, so he's on the Grand Ole Opry. What was the question?
Koto.
Oh, Koto. Okay. So his son, Gary, that's what I'm saying. Gary came down. This is hysterical.
Very nice.
That's us.
All right.
Yeah, okay. And Andy Wallace just gave me this other picture that this is at Wolf Trap, 1976.
Very nice.
You see that skinny guy with the
Yeah,
red
yeah,
shirt?
yeah,
We
yeah.
were dressed up, yeah. And anyway, so Koto, so it was Gary. He got some people around. He got Bessel DuYoung, who's friend. My mother used to play cards with his mother, and my mother used to say, "Don't hang around him." Of course, I did, because Bessel's father recorded in 1936 with a string band, Cajun string band, and but Bessel was a musician and a great musician, and so we played twin fiddles, and there was twin guitars, drums, and we brought the young people together. It was like this thing happening. This was like from about 74 to 77. And we really united a lot of people, because the old Cajuns would come, "What are y'all doing?" I mean, we'd play a song like Mardi Gras, which is one of the oldest songs, and people had never heard that. Of course, our rendition was a little long, but it was like, it was fun. It was a happening time. And it was kind of like we're very creative, but it was kind of like Spinal Tap. Like the drummers would evaporate. But we lost, 3 of our guitar players died. So that's why David didn't want to go in the group, I don't blame him. And, but it was just, it's the thing to say. So that brought a lot of awareness. And so it also brought a rock influence into it, but at the same time, a folk mentality. And that's where, when we played, when Andy just said, when we played the National Folk Festival, it was both Koto and Beausoleil, because my whole idea was to do this acoustically, like I heard it. We didn't need rock, we didn't need a drum, we just need a, guitar, fiddle, accordion, and percussion. So this is the original Beausoleil group. And And that was enough for me. So that's sort of what Koto did. But a lot of people still remember that.
Yeah, and then after that, some of those influences did get absorbed into Beausoleil.
Yeah, because that was in the 80s, because that's what they wanted. That's what Ken Irwin with Rounder wanted. He wanted the Koto sound. I said, well, we're not getting Koto again. You know, I mean, it happened when it happened. And then we tried to do it again. In fact, we got together to do another Koto album. Well, only one. I mean, it was like, because, anyway. And then the guitar player dies. So, I mean, it's like, you know, so
Yeah. But, I mean, it's worked for Beausoleil, though, to have those influences.
Yeah,
and
of course.
It sort of made you the Cajun band that anybody knows.
Well, it was, yeah, I don't know what that did. We played. I mean, you know, it's like what our thing was to play this music in the schools, and we had a grant, Dewey and I had a grant together to do this. And we did a lot in the schools, taught all the way to the university level, you know, to educate people about this before it's totally gone. And I'm not talking about my generation, people way beyond me. And that was what we really wanted to do. But then people, like the first year of Beausoleil, we played the National Folk Festival. We played Jimmy Carter's inauguration in '77. We had all these gigs, and we, you know, anyway. And so it got to the point in the mid '80s that it was hard to hold down a regular job and go out on the weekends and play these festivals. So in '85, we decided, let's try this. Let's just try it. You know, everybody go jump in, you know, give it 6 months, see what happens. So we did that in '86, and hey, we've been doing it ever since. You know, I mean, it has ebbs and flows, but it's, we were very lucky to be at a certain time and to know these people and be able to play with these people and learn their music firsthand. Nowadays, I mean, kids, you can go on YouTube and hear whatever you want, but in those times, you had to be a person, and when you knock on a door and somebody you don't know, you know, it's a whole different thing to do that, because you don't want to take their music, you just want to learn their music. So you befriend these people, then you're friends for life. Mm-hmm. You can't do that to YouTube, they don't talk back.
Right. So we haven't talked to Billy much. So, you know, a lot of what we're saying applies to percussion as well. There's been a lot of changes over the years, and I think that integration of new sounds into Beausoleil must have changed what you do. So talk a little about that, if you would.
Well, sure. I mean, I was on that original Swallow record recording, and I had been doing. I hadn't been playing Cajun music. I had been doing with a group of people, small group of people, and we improvised music for choreographers at the university, and we would continue going through this process and codify it so it was in its final form for the performances. And I was playing in different sized jazz groups, from a quartet to a quintet to a septet, doing real book stuff. And that's what I was doing when I got word from a mutual friend of ours, Michael and I, Francis Poppy, the artist. Mm-hmm. I'm an old friend of his, you know. The word was Michael was going to do this record, and he wanted to know if I wanted to participate. So I did, you know. So I brought some of this to the party, so to speak. And I was just trying to figure out what to do, basically, you know. Because there was a certain lightness to a lot of the way that these songs were played. I mean, I'd heard some English folk music and things like that, so that was part of my thinking for those songs, you know. And I would just apply things where I thought percussion made sense. You know, if it needed this for drive or color or whatever, I would use it there, you know. But I didn't just gratuitously add something, and I still don't do that, you know. And but as far as adding percussion to Cajun music, nobody does that. I'm the only guy. I'm standing alone out in my field, you know. Nobody's come after me, so I don't know what to make of that. But
it didn't make any sense to me to think about Billy. He was so talented. He played triangle. He had to get triangle from.
I didn't even have one for that first recording. You know?
Yeah, but the thing is, all our music. I said we would play, you know, Zydeco music or some Zydeco song, Creole song. Why didn't they use drums? That's like the basic thing. Yeah. And Billy had, you know, his hand on all this kind of stuff, and I said that gels the music, that brings it all together. So it's very unique.
Yeah, yeah. And you can change off if you have a varied kit. You can change off during a song, and it's like, and frankly, I took that approach from looking at early weather report stuff. You know, from the beginning of the '70s. You know, I wasn't quite as interactive and as spontaneous in my approach to applying that. but still, just the idea that you could use different things in different places to articulate and whatever, expand upon.
It just changes the texture during the song. Which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
a
but
good
that's
thing.
where I was coming from. And frankly, that's where I still come from.
With that weather report, it's going to rain.
Not
And
today.
okay.
Let me see. It looks like, feels like 82, mostly cloudy night. You know.
So did you even play triangle at first, or did you
No,
have to
I
learn
didn't even
that?
own one.
Right.
You know, matter of fact, there was when we went to Floyd Swallow's studio. There was one lying around that said, "Here, you can
That's
use this."
right.
I went, oh, great! It's a relief. I've got something to play here.
Right.
You know? And I put, you know, I don't know if you've heard that record, but I put all kinds of stuff on. You know, it's like I just brought a bunch of things, and we would pile into a van, as I remember it. David and Michael and I.
That's
occasionally-
pretty much it.
Yeah, it was wild. You know, at the end of the day, and we would drive up there and work into the night, and then we would finish and then drive back afterwards. You know, I don't even know how long that took.
It took us a long time.
Yeah, it seemed like weeks to me. You know, that was, you know, so.
But Billy, you got to see that with his triangle, because Don Montese is an accordion player and is a bus driver, and he's a welder, so he made these beautiful
Oh, yeah.
triangles from the rakes. And you'd have to go to him. And Billy's got one that's extended, and Don said, well, I messed up on that one. Billy says, I love that one. And
yeah.
he plays, what was it, a tractor, like
Well,
some kind of wrench or
the
something?
triangle is actually Don Montuse had made that for a certain individual, a custom T-Fair, as they say, you know. And I saw that, and as Michael said, I want that one. He said, well, you know, that guy, he just recently died, so he's not going to be using it. So I bought that one from him. And the striker is when I was in college, I was walking to a building on a field, and my foot hit something, and I looked, and it was a gear shift from apparently like you know, like a tractor or something. And he's threading on the end where the ball went and everything. There's still like the catalog number on the part. But you know, it's got a great balance.
Yeah, sounds
You know,
good.
because it tapers towards the end, and you can do that, and it balances beautifully. And because it's tapered, and because it's not completely round or flat, you can get a lot of different tonalities at it. So if you get like a capable Cajun triangle like that, or a T-Fair, you can use this thing and apply it in different ways, and turning it this way, and you can get subtle shifts in tonality which can mirror the melody of the song. You know, so.
Excellent. Wow, we got more about the different tonalities of the triangle than the fiddle.
How about that? Yeah.
That's pretty
Feel
good.
it sounds the same.
Right. So I also wanted to talk to Mitch about some of the other groups that you've been in, like Tasso and some of those groups. What was the philosophy there with other bands you've been in?
Oh yeah, well with Tasso, in fact, Mike produced our record. It was to just try to sound like the old '78 records, and we found this guy in the swamp, Philip Allemont. He was spraying water lilies for wildlife and fisheries, but he sounded just like these old guys, and his accordion was he played one of Errol Barrett's accordions, and but Mike has like the first accordion Mark Savoy ever made.
Wow.
And it's this wild accordion sound, and so Mike let us borrow it, and we did a record, and Mike produced it, and it was just to really sound like those old '78s, you know.
Mm-hmm. I think I've got that record. So,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
cool. Oh, good.
Yeah. Excellent. So it was
Yeah.
good job for
Thank
all
you.
of you. So great. And the other person that's now come up a whole bunch of times and has also been a musical partner of yours for a long time is Mark Savoy.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk a little about the Savoy influence on Cajun music, but also on
You mean the Dynasty?
Yeah, the Dynasty, the band.
Well, the thing about Mark is a super intelligent person, which is unusual around where we live. And but he's very special. Like I said, he was born at a certain time where he was one foot in one time era, the other foot in the modern time. And he decided, I think he's celebrating his 50th year or something like that of opening his store. Wow. And he did that because after he heard that people went in Newport, he said, oh, it's going to be popular. So there was only one or very few accordion makers at that time. So he started making, because he's graduated in engineering. And he started making accordions because we didn't have, I mean, they would fall apart. You know, they had these old Horners or the Monarch and Sterlings, which were made pre-World War II Germany. And so he started doing that. So he was the focal point where you'd find it. And if you want to have a bow hair, you bring it to him, because he'd bring it to Lionel, you find out. But Mark was is a treasure trove of what was going on at that time. It just so happens it was at that 1976 National Folk Festival where Mark just showed up. He actually played with us, but he would pull me to the side. Come on, Mike, let's just jam. So we'd go wherever, and lo and behold, this young woman by the name of Anne Allen Savoy from Richmond, Virginia, showed up, and was totally enamored in the music. And she went and she and Mark got together, and that's Mrs. Savoy. Yeah. And of course they had kids all along, and their kids have done. I mean, from Sarah, who's in France, she's a chef and plays accordion, to Joel, who's got a music label, and Wilson, who plays boogie woogie and all the stuff, and it's a very solid family, but I mean they're crazy like everybody else, and it's just fun, and the thing with this, Mark is just very aware about what is right, what is wrong. I mean, we've had long discussions about, in the early days, and I'm talking about in the early 70s, about really the influence of the Creoles, the black Creoles. And I was always been a proponent of Amadé Ardwin because, I love his music. And people in Cage was, he played too many notes or choppy and stuff like that. But the quality of what he played and the creativity is just amazing. And a lot of us didn't have access to these things, although his parents, Amadé played at Mark's parents' house. I mean, Dennis used to live in the house he's living now. Right. So it's a funny thing how that happened. So it's one of those people that it's just it's a cornerstone of our. He's a cornerstone of our society, and that's just the way it is. And he didn't try to be it. It wasn't. He doesn't want any kind of accolades or anything like that. And a lot of people, I can do this, blah, blah. And that's another lesson that, you just, Oktay Clark used to say, he said, well, you can't do it wrong if you do it right. And I think you just try to do it right for the right reasons. And so Mark has been a great example of that to everybody. And people sometimes are scared because if he doesn't like you, I mean, don't touch that guitar. You gonna buy it? It's time for you to leave. He doesn't care. I mean, he goes beyond what most anything. I mean, it's like he's got a sign in his shop. It says Stradivari made 661 instruments. The Cajuns have 2,000 of them. It's like they all take it, and other philosophies. So yeah, he's quite an individual, and the family is great. And I just had dinner with him last Saturday, so they're alive and well. Say hello.
All right. Yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask about was songwriting, because you played a couple of songs today that you wrote. Yeah. But they sound like they could be traditional songs, and certainly they have traditional expressions in them. Just the way that you wrote them is really in keeping with the tradition. What's your philosophy on that, on songwriting?
Well, I mean, I haven't written that many songs. I mean, 100 something or so. But anyway. In the old, it's nice to do an expression. I love traditional music. When David and I got together, that was it. I mean, we're just going to learn as much as we can, different styles. But there's a certain point. I use the metaphor as a wheel. Sometimes there's a cog missing, and you're not saying exactly what you want to say. So creating a song or writing a song gives you that element, and so you perpetuate that. And a lot of the songs that I like to write or did at some points was about musicians, like Bebe Carriere, Freeman, Fontenot, people that most people don't know, but to us, they're revered. And so songs about that. Other songs are more modern songs, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And it's wonderful to hear people play them, But I don't write them for other people, I write them for us. And because it just works really well with both sides of this key and things like that. And David sings this song and things like that. So I enjoy writing. I don't write as much as anymore, but I still do.
Well, on the other end of that, you had mentioned that there were times when people didn't have access to some of the older music. They weren't able to get them either because they were on old 78s or because they were in old archival recordings. And we have an interest in that because, you know, this is the Library of Congress
Oh, this
where the
where we are?
Lomaxes
I
did,
knew it looked
did
familiar.
the recordings
Okay,
for.
okay.
So talk about the influence of archival recordings on what
Well,
you've
I
done.
came here when we got a grant. It's called the Francophone Studies Grant at that time, USL. And it was an amazing grant is that we had music, we had language. There was no such thing as a Cajun dictionary. They had been Cajun dictionaries like in the 30s and things like that. People who studied the Sorbonne, amazing stuff they found. Architecture, women, Creole, et cetera, like so it was around the corner. So I was asked to teach the Cajun or French music. The name of my course was French Music in Louisiana, Opera de Zydeco. So that's pretty vast.
Yeah.
One of those things that we knew about, and I was befriended in the early 70s, was a woman by the name of Irene Whitfield Holmes, who wrote one of the first books. It was her 1939 LSU thesis on folk songs of French Louisiana. And, you know, another one, well, I thought she was dead too. And my aunt said, well, no, she lives right behind over there. So I went and we became really good friends. And she's the one who gave me my first Amadeo Arduin 78, which you could play in those days. You know?
Right.
And she played violin, so we played these terrible duets together. But her book, I learned a lot of book, and some of my first records were, she transcribed Alan and John Lomax's recordings, transcribed them. I'd never heard them. And from her transcriptions, we recorded about 3 of their songs. And then finally in 1979, I came down here to collect the whole Lomax collections, and that's when Hickerson was here. And I couldn't leave. I had never heard anything like this. It was so amazing. So thanks to the library. And now, of course, we met Alan Lomax, and he came down, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, I think when Alan Jabbour was here too, we're kind of shy. You know, it's like, man, Washington, but, you know, But once you get here, you realize it's all run by human beings who have the same passion that we do. So it kind of knocked down those walls. So yeah, we very much appreciate being here and being able to perform.
Well, we love to have you here, and
Well, we're free next week.
all right. So you know, it's now time when I'm going to ask you guys if there's anything else you feel that should be said about your tradition, about Cajun music.
I don't think it's dying.
Yeah, it's alive and well. It's different. It changes. It's not the same thing, like David was saying. You know, it's never going to be the same, and people have to accept that. Cajun music kind of changes. That's why it perpetuates itself like that. You find a lot more people singing in English, and that's going to happen because people can understand it. You're not just going to sing a song just because people can't understand it. That's not the point of it.
Right.
The point of it was to sing in French because that's who your audience was. And you know, it's hard to deal with this, to see it change. I mean, we saw the changes in the 70s when, you know, well, first of all, when Will and Rodney Balfour died February 9th, 1979. I mean, that's like the day the music died.
Yeah.
And because it was never really the same, even for Dewey. And then Nathan died the year after that, and then Dewey's wife died, you know. And so anyway, it's like you know, you play this music because you love it, and you live life to the fullest, and that's what it is. And that's still the same.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And people want to hear stories now. That's what you know, I play with a couple of little bands, and I did one in a town called Mars, Louisiana, about a month ago with one of the Pine Leaf Boys. And these guys they all played, but they had hired him to do this Knights of Columbus thing. But what they wanted to hear, because I was there, I knew Canray Fontenot. They wanted to hear stories about Canray that they don't know. Right. They wanted to hear a couple of stories about Dewey, even Dewey, but also Dennis. Nobody knows the story about Dennis when we took him to New York, and he almost had a heart attack, and Michael stole him out of a hospital.
Well, now you
and
got
still
it.
had his electrodes
Hey,
on.
Gladys.
But things like that, that's what people, because they don't, there's no contact. They don't, those people aren't there.
That was
But
the YouTube
we lived
crowd.
through that, you see? So we saw this, and it's like, you tell a story to him, people say, no, they don't believe any of them. Mitchell has stories of some of the old timers.
But you know, yeah, you got the time when you know, James Booker is a great piano player, and we were just happened to be in New Orleans, so there were about 15 people there, and he'd play a song. And he says, "Okay, he had a new album. Okay, who wants to buy an album?" Well, after 15 songs, we all had his album. That was his last concert.
Didn't play no more.
15 people. I've talked to about 100 people who told me they were there. And I said, well, funny, I don't remember you there. And so you have this, even though it's folklore and people want to, I heard this anyway. So that's changed too. So the thing is to set it straight, you know.
Well, now you have to tell a story about Canray, because you, because
There's a lot of that.
Oh my God! Oh well, we can't.
Let me tell you.
We all look at it.
Like Michael had an emergency kidney stone.
Oh,
He
yeah.
couldn't make the trip.
With Beausoleil.
So it's like, oh, you know, he's heard all this.
So
He
who's
gets
going to get
Canray- he gets
replaced?
Canray to take his
Who
place.
else, man?
So what
They
are
said
we going
what?
to do? So, you know, Canray, we got him a ticket. You know, this is the old days. You could change the name on the ticket.
right.
And I remember calling up, Michael gave me his phone number, and I talked to his wife. Said, he's so excited, David. He's drunk in a ditch somewhere. I said, oh my God, he's going to show up for the gig. And then we go, I don't even know if Michael knows this. He was my roommate.
Yeah.
And we get to that later. We play the gig, and you know, Canray liked to drink a little bit. And for some reason, the promoter had a half gallon of early times backstage. And we were playing in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Canray, we all talked about it and said, all right, we're going to go play 2 or 3 songs, and you come out and play the rest of the set. We'll introduce you and all this. No problem. We played the 3 songs. Canray so play another song. Canray, he comes out and talked for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That reminds me of another story. Another story. Okay, so he's a little drunk, and then we haven't eaten yet. So we ended up, the only place that was open in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is the truth, it was a Hooters. And our agent at the time took us, we went to eat at Hooters.
And of course, it was
So
awful.
then we all go to the hotel, and it's like, Canray's my roommate, and I didn't know he had false teeth. And he took out his teeth, and it looked like E.T. When I woke up, I said, who are you? He was something else. But he was a character. And these are stories that, you know, there's a lot of them.
Well, it's just playing with it.
It's the
We gotta
right place
keep it
at
all
the
together,
right
you know?
time.
Oh, the time we played for Dutch Morial, who was running for mayor, the first black mayor of New Orleans. And Canray was somehow involved in this. I do not know how, but we had to play a fundraiser. We all get on the stage. Well, Canray's tuned in between standard pitch and somewhere.
He's like Ornette Fontenot.
You know, he was our accordion player in the key of C, and Canray's like in C sharp or above. Who knows? And we played songs in double keys the whole night. It was very strange.
That's the way it's supposed to sound.
Right.
But Canray was very, I mean, he was
Somehow
born,
right.
he lost his father. His father was an accordion player, just the same caliber as Amédée Ardouin, but he chose not to record. And he had to work and support his mother and his sisters, et cetera. So he had a hard life. He always kind of, you know, had that on it. And one of the, I mean, there's so many stories like David said, but one of the times he said, when Chris called me up, said we went to get Canray just to record him. And we had to, and we went to where he was working, was lifting feed seeds. I mean, feed sacks. Yeah, okay. It is sacks of feeds. Anyway, you know what I mean. And the people who, the proprietors of the place says, why are you interested in, you know, I'm not going to use the term, but you can imagine. And I said, well, basically he's a genius, and they just, great, you know. So, and we went there that night. He was very. We had a great meal, and we did the record. And he took off his shoes and just his foot like that against the floor. So that was one of the high points, just playing that, he and I. But I mean, he was. We played in Port Townsend in 1980, and you know, a lot of white people there. So Canray hits the bottle again, and he says, "This is how he opens the concert. I feel like a fly in a bowl of milk." You know. So, but you know, it's like that's a whole different interview, man. I'd rather not get started like that. And you know, everybody knew him. Everybody's got their story.
But basically, you know, we were there active in this transition point in between what was fundamentally the 19th century and the 20th century for that culture, you know, and all those old guys were going away, you know.
But he was amazing to know that there's a whole different.
Yeah.
Or the time we played it at Carnegie Hall, we were all in the cab. Guess how the cab said,
I've been here before.
Yeah, I've been here.
Played with
Yeah.
Clifton.
I've been to that place.
and he was a genius. So that's just him.
Yeah.
There's countless others. You know.
Yeah.
So
Well, one thing that, you know, something that you said earlier reminded me of, you were talking about how playing English songs is becoming more common because people don't understand the French songs. But that sort of made me think about the influence of other French-speaking places. You know, you recorded your first album in France, and Canada is sort of a big place too. So how is that sort of global French community affected you
Well,
guys?
they didn't have a category for Cajun music. We were world music for around it. They didn't know where to put us. It is really world music when you think about all the influences. You know, it's like what happened, it wasn't just now, it happened in the 50s, and it's a certain genre of music that's a mixture of rockabilly and New Orleans music, and it's called swamp pop. This guy's, Broden came up with that. And it's rock and roll. And one of the guys, Rod Bernard, sang Alon Dulce Colinda, rock and roll. He was actually on American Bandstand. So it's always, you know, we wanted to make the transition, but they wanted to do with electric guitars and things like that, so it wasn't done with accordions. That came later. And Jimmy C. Newman, you know, he sings in English too, et cetera, like that. So, you know, all that, and Kershaw, I can say that too. So, I mean, it's slowly, it's there. And I think it's for it to survive, it has to regenerate into something else, as long as it's real, you know.
Well, you guys definitely play real music.
No.
I think we can all say
That's
that.
all that we know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for this interview. It's been a great time sharing stories about
My pleasure.
Cajun music and French music.
That's what we're talking about. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.